Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have an exciting book video for you. I mean, it's pretty exciting for me. I don't know about you, but these are my reading plans for 2021. I will be talking and very quickly about the books that I'd like to get to this year. So let's get ahead with it. So the first book that I'd like to talk about is Catcher in the Rye. This is a book that I read a few years ago, but I think I was pretty young to understand what the book was about. So I'd like to give it a second shot. So the second book that I'd like to talk about is Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. I really love this author's works. She has written The Hate You Give and On the Come Up. This book, The Concrete Rose, is actually a prequel of The Hate You Give because it follows Star Carter's father, Maverick Carter, and his life as a young black teenage boy. And I'm really excited to get through this book, and I'm going to wait till my birthday to buy it and read it. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is Plague by Albert Camus. I have actually really liked this author's works before, and I'd once again like to read another book which is uh, based on a pandemic that happens in the story, of course, and I have during this time I'd really like to read about it because I think indirectly it would give me a lot of lessons as to what to do when there's a pandemic, and if what is happening in the book is very similar to what's happening in our life right now. So the next book that I'd like to read is Emma by Jane Austen. I tried reading Pride and Prejudice, but I did not enjoy the reading experience so much. I think it really confused me with a huge cast of characters. But I really loved the movie. But with Emma, I really want to read it because I've heard that it's a light classic and it's a good classic to get started with. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is Love Your Life by Sophie Kinsella. Sophie Kinsella is one of my favorite authors of contemporary fiction, and she really makes characters very relatable. I understand them and I love them, and the author is such a magician, and I really want to try this book too. I kind of started reading it and then I DNF'd it for a while because I was getting into a book slump, not because of the book, but because I've been reading a lot of books at the same time. So I'd like to slow down and make my reading goals extremely realistic as to how slowly or how fast I want to read as many books as I want to read. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. This is, I think, a historical fiction set in America. I do not know which part of it, but I think it's definitely the South America. And this is about a girl who loses her mother to a gunshot, and her father blames her for killing her mother, and then he just distances himself from her for the rest of the book. And just a second. Where was I? So she meets these three women who she travels around the country with, and she learns of life, she learns to live with them and their personalities. And this is what the synopsis that I've read so far, and I'd really like to get to this book because I've heard amazing things about it. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. I have been wanting to read this book for quite a while, and my friend suggested I start this author's works as soon as possible. And the next book that I'd like to talk about by the same author is Kafka on the Shore. This got a lot more reviews and hype than the previous book that I was just talking about, which is The Norwegian Wood. And I'd like to give both of these books a shot this year. The next book that I'd like to talk about is Current Show by Parimal Murugan. This is an Indian author's works, and I don't know anything about this book right now, but I will talk about it when I read it and I give a review for it. It may probably be in a wrap-up video more than an individual book review. So this is one of my most anticipated book that I still haven't read in a really long time. Actually, I haven't read at all, which is The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. Now, my entire family has read this book and I still haven't gotten to it, and I will. Definitely this year I'm going to read this book and I'm really excited to read it and review it for you. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is A Suitable Boy by Vikram Seth. And this book, I think it is written in verse, I'm not sure, but I'd really like to get to it. I had watched the TV series that came out on Netflix and I really enjoyed it. I think it was so literary, but it had this amazing family drama, and I'd like to read it because it had a really good diverse cast of characters, and I like that. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Blackberry. Yep, this book is about burning books, but of course that's all I know about the story, and that's literally the only synopsis that I've ever read. And I'd like to find out more only after reading, and that's when I'll give you a good review too for this book. It's been on my list for years now, and I'm really embarrassed that I haven't gotten to it. Like, really embarrassed. Okay, so this next book that I'd like to talk about is Murder at the Mushaira. It's actually written by a friend of ours called Mir Ali Raza. He lives in New Jersey and he's also a professor. But this book has a lot of Persian and reference and culture of food and poetry, because Mushaira is basically a gathering of musical poetry. If I'm wrong, I will correct it in the editing Raja form. But this is a book that I've been excited to read because it's a mystery of a murder at a Mushaira. That's pretty much the title of the book. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levinseller. This is a fantasy, a YA fantasy, but it has a great plot. I think out of the synopsis that I've read, it's about this girl who wants to kill the king, but there's another guy who also wants to kill the king, but because she wants to take revenge, she has to stop that guy from killing the king so that she can kill the king. This was literally the synopsis by another YouTuber that I watch, a booktuber specifically, and it really intrigued me, and I really want to read this book this year, hopefully in paperback format. So the next book that I'd like to talk about is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. The Clockwork Reader, which is Hannah, has really talked about this book a lot. I mean, it's one of her favorites, and I'd really like to give it a shot because I really know why she likes them. It's a good cast of deep, lovable characters and a great plot, and I really like that in my stories. And I like a whole circus atmosphere with magical components in it. And it's been a book that has also been sitting on my mental TBR list for a really long time, and I don't want it to gather dust. So the last book that I'd like to talk about, guys, if you watched previous videos of mine and know that I really enjoy Cassandra Clare's books a lot, well, this year will also go by with at least one Cassandra Clare book in my 2021 plans, which is Chain of Iron, which is a sequel of Chain of Gold in the Last Hour series. And I am excited to read it because I really enjoyed her English setting, the historical romance kind of a background, atmosphere, circumstances. All of them, basically. But yeah, I really like her English ones more than I like her American ones. And I am excited to get through all of these books. So thank you very much for being here with me. and goodbye, everyone.